Welcome back to the Talking Sports Podcast right here on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. I am your host, Peter DiBiasi, and welcome back to another edition of the Talking Sports Podcast. Make sure you guys follow us on social media at Talking Sports PD on X and on Instagram. All the links are in the description. And as always, thank you to our sponsor and our partner of this great podcast, Underdog Fantasy. Use code TSP for a 100% deposit match up to $100 on Underdog Fantasy. It is a great time to get on Underdog Fantasy. MLB, NFL right around the corner, college football, Wimbledon, the Open Championship is coming up. So that episode is going to be out in a couple weeks for you guys. Get on Underdog Fantasy. Link is in the description and use code TSP. We've been doing a lot. We've been doing a lot of golf episodes. We did an NBA draft episode. Today, we have another NBA episode. As always, like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. Road to 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. So, we're taking a break from the golf. We're going back to another NBA episode here. And today's NBA episode is, you guys have realized free agency is kind of coming to an end. So, NBA.com, shout out to them, does a great job of putting together each breakdown of free agency for each team. I'm going to go as quickly as possible so it's not a 2-hour episode, break down the key moves for each team, kind of talk about it, all that fun stuff. So guys, don't go anywhere. Let's get right into it. We're going to add it to the stage so you guys can see this as well as I can see this. So we're going to start with the Atlanta Hawks, right? So for Apple Podcasts and Spotify, guys, I'm going to do my best to try to recap this to you as best as possible. But the Atlanta Hawks had an interesting offseason, right? They signed Nickeil Alexander-Walker from the Minnesota Timberwolves to a 4-year deal. They added Luke Kennard, a shooting guard and a guard that shoots. And then Kristaps Porzingis from the Boston Celtics. They lost Clint Capella, Karis LeVert, Larry Nance Jr., Georges Niang, and Terrence Mann. So I kind of like this offseason from Atlanta. I think Kristaps Porzingis, if he stays healthy, is one of the better big men in the league. He's a stretch 4, can play the 5, all that fun stuff. They move off Clint Capella, so they kind of replace Kristaps Porzingis with Clint Capella. They get a little more scoring in that department. And then I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the playoffs showed how valuable he is in this to the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? And that's why he inked a 4-year deal. So you add Walker, you add Porzingis with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. Look, I don't know if this team is a title contending team because they probably aren't, but with the shakeup in the Eastern Conference with some injuries and how open it is, I do think the additions of Porzingis and Alexander Walker, along with Murray and Young, can kind of make the Hawks battle for maybe not a play-in spot, maybe it's 5 or 6 seed. So I kind of like what Atlanta did this offseason. Not really going all in because there's not really an all-in move when you're paying DeJounte Murray and you're paying Trae Young, but the closest to it is adding Alexander Walker and Porzingis. So I do not hate this offseason from Atlanta. Another Eastern Conference team, Boston Celtics. So they added Georges Niang, Luka Garza, Josh Minott, and then Anthony Simons, who's the biggest ad we'll talk about in a second. They lose Drew Holiday, they lose Luke Cornett, and they lose Kristaps Porzingis. This was always going to happen for Boston. Boston had a window where they could pay multiple guys high money and win a championship. It was basically a 2 to 3 year window, and they got a championship last year, right? Obviously, this year they lose in the second round to the Knicks after winning the championship last year. So I'm going to make that clear. It worked because they won a championship the previous year. They lose in round 2 to the Knicks, and then Jason Tatum tears his Achilles. So Jason Tatum's out basically all of next season. So this was probably the right time for Boston to kind of reset. They move off Drew Holiday, who's a good veteran guard, getting paid a lot, and they move off Kristaps Porzingis, getting paid a lot, and they could not afford to bring back Luke Cornett. They add Anthony Simons. That is the thing that stands out to them because Tatum is going to be out for this entirety of the season. So it's Jaylen Brown and it's Derek White's show. You add Anthony Simons in, and I think you can stay afloat. I don't know if Boston's really a title contender team heading into the season, but they can definitely be a non-play-in team with adding Anthony Simons. I think that was a very good trade from Boston. They get scoring. They move off a high-value guy in Drew Holiday, a lot of money. They could not afford to keep Porzingis, so they move off Porzingis, and they could not afford to bring back Luke Cornett. Big man is very concerning for Boston. It is. but I think they're going to have scoring with Jaylen Brown and Anthony Simons. Brooklyn Nets. Well, not much to here. They had 5 draft picks. They used those 5 draft picks, and people have debated were those the right picks. We'll find out, but they used all 5 picks. They move off Cameron Johnson, so it's not – oh, I got to move down. Sorry. They move off Cameron Johnson, so you guys can see all of this. They re-signed De'Aaron Sharp and Zaire Williams, good backup rotational kind of guys. They add Terrence Mann, who can be a good scoring player. And they add Michael Porter Jr., who's going to take a lot of shots. They move off D'Angelo Russell and they move off Trendon Watford, nothing there. And then they trade Cam Johnson for Michael Porter Jr. It's an interesting trade, right? Michael Porter Jr. is going to take a lot of shots. He's a high volume scorer that doesn't offer a lot on the defensive side of the ball. So is Cam Thomas. So how those two in Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas is going to work together is going to be interesting. Throw in Igor Demen, who they drafted, handful other couple picks, including Drake Powell. They added a handful of players via draft, kind of some guys that could develop into players. We'll see. Igor Demen is the guy they expect to develop into a star. You pair that with Cam Thomas. They add Terrence Mann, who's another good guard, and Michael Porter Jr. I don't love the Cam Johnson, Michael Porter Jr. trade, but I think if they were going for scoring, it was probably more Michael Porter Jr. He can get a more high volume score. I do expect the Brooklyn Nets to be bad again, but I do expect Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas to take a lot of shots. Charlotte Hornets. They brought back Trey Mann, who's their starting point guard. They added Pat Connaughton, Spencer Dinwiddie, Mason Plumlee, and Colin Sexton. They lose Joseph Nurkic, and they traded Mark Williams for a first-round pick, which I thought was a great trade. So they lose some big man help, right? And they add Mason Plumlee. They drafted Con Kneppel. They bring back Trey Mann. I like Trey Mann as a nice, solid guard. Colin Sexton has always been a type of guy where you think he can turn into like an all-star, maybe just below an all-star level point guard, and he really hasn't, but he has the potential, and he's a good player. He's just not a transcendent player or an all-star player. I don't mind trading away Mark Williams. He has health concerns. He hasn't been in shape. You get a future first-round pick. That was a good move. Joseph Nurkic is fine. I do expect, Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, Con Kneppel with Colin Sexton, maybe Dinwiddie still offers a little scoring. Yeah, I would expect Hornets to probably miss the playoffs once again, but there is some intriguing pieces here, but they didn't do anything in this offseason free agency-wise. So this is not draft. I know I'm mentioning draft players. Free agency-wise, where I'm like, well, they really moved the needle. They added some nice players. Colin Sexton, they brought back Mann. Dinwiddie's a solid player, but nothing to really move the needle, in my opinion. My Chicago Bulls, wow, they stink. So they brought back Trey Jones, 3-year deal, nice backup veteran point guard. When he came over in the trade midseason, he averaged 11 points a game off the bench in about 20, 25 minutes a game. So I think he's very good. They move off Lonzo Ball and they add Isaac Okoro. I don't hate this. I don't hate this as much as other people did. When I mean other people did, I mean national media and the Bulls fans. But you traded the better player in a 1-for-1 type of trade where you didn't even get a pick back. It could have even been a protected first-round pick. But I do think the Bulls needed to get some sort of first-round pick back. If it's a couple years down the road, so be it. But look, Isaac Okoro is a young wing who has struggled to score, but he can really defend the basketball. You pair that with Josh Giddey. You pair that with Kobe White, Messias Buzelis, Noah Asenge, who they just drafted. Will they move off Nikola Vucevic? That's probably one piece left that is still pending. And could it be for Jonathan Kuminga? They still have Ayo DeSumo. I like bringing back Trey Jones. Like I said, not really a needle mover. Isaac Okoro has a little bit upside, but he hasn't really shown enough offensive game in order to trade Lonzo Ball. I don't mind moving off Lonzo Ball. I wish they got a little bit more in return than just Isaac Okoro. But good move for the Cavs. We'll get to that in a second. Right here, we're talking about the Cavs. They add Lonzo Ball, who could be a really good guard next to Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. They also have Evan Mobley, Sam Morrell. They return him on a 4-year deal. They had Lonzo Ball, and who I think could be a really good backup defending guard for Cleveland. Bringing Larry Nance, nice stretch 4. They couldn't afford to bring back Ty Jerome. Obviously, he goes to Memphis in a pretty big deal, and then they move off Isaac Okoro. With how open this East is, I do think Cleveland is the favorite to come out of the East. They were 1 seed and they lose in the second round to Indiana this past season. You bring in Lonzo Ball, you get a veteran point guard off the bench that can defend, that can facilitate an offense. You still have Darius Garland, you still have Donovan Mitchell, and you still have Evan Mobley. And you bring in Larry Nance Jr., Ty Jerome and Isaac Okoro are not going to be needle movers enough for Cleveland to move out of the 1 seed probably in this Eastern Conference. Dallas. Well, we know what they did in the draft, guys. What did they do? They got Cooper Flagg somehow. Obviously, they brought back Kyrie Irving, who's recovering from an Achilles injury. We'll see his timetable closer to the season. They bring back Dante Exum. They add D'Lo, and then they move off Spencer Dinwiddie. The biggest thing here is, when is Kyrie Irving coming back to pair him with Cooper Flagg and Anthony Davis? And how much does D'Angelo Russell have in the tank? How much can D'Angelo Russell run an NBA offense at this point of his career with Cooper Flagg and Anthony Davis to keep Dallas afloat? I don't mind the D'Lo. I think he'll be off the bench once Kyrie returns. The biggest thing is, when does Kyrie return? Denver Nuggets. They didn't bring anybody back, but they added Bruce Brown. They brought back Bruce Brown from their championship team. Good idea. They traded Michael Porter Jr., and they traded Dario Saric. They added Cam Johnson, who's a really good 3-and-D player who fits perfectly for Denver with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, because he doesn't need the ball in his hands, and he's not a high-volume scorer, but he can score. But he's a really good on-ball and good defender. They bring in Jonas Valanciunas, who is probably going to stay. There's some rumors that he's leaving to Greece. We'll see if he stays, but he'll be a really good backup center behind Nikola Jokic. If Jonas Valanciunas stays, this is a really good offseason for Denver. Cam Johnson fits perfectly, more than Michael Porter Jr. did in his role. Bruce Brown was part of the championship-level team. Tim Hardaway is a good scorer off the bench, and Jonas Valanciunas is a good backup center. Denver's going to be a title contender once again, and I think their bench moves and the guys they brought in, including Cam Johnson, who will be starting for Denver, I think this was a really good offseason from Denver. Nothing crazy, but a really nice, solid offseason. Detroit Pistons, a team that shocked people, a team that got into the playoffs, obviously lost in the first round to the Knicks, but were in the playoffs. They brought back Paul Reed on a 2-year deal. They added Karis LeVert, who is very hit or miss, but has a chance to be a solid off-the-bench player for them. Duncan Robinson. They also add some 3-point shooting off the bench, which they needed. They lose Tim Hardaway and they lose Dennis Schroeder. So they basically replaced Dennis Schroeder with Tim Hardaway Jr. with Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson, a little bit of Dennis Schroeder. I don't hate this. Nothing they really could have done. They didn't have a ton of cap space, but I like Karis LeVert and I like Duncan Robinson, what they can do. Solid offseason from Detroit. Warriors. The biggest thing is the Jonathan Kuminga thing. They've done nothing. They lost Kevin Looney to the Pelicans. They had no additions, and they brought back no one. What will happen with Jonathan Kuminga? Does he go to Chicago for a Nikola Vucevic trade? Golden State needs a big man, and I think Nikola fits them. Could that be a package with Jonathan Kuminga? That's been talked about multiple times. Nothing has transpired just yet, but we'll see if something happens down the road. So nothing for Golden State this offseason. Houston. Holy shit. So we won't even get to the departures yet because we can't fit them on the screen, can I? Wait, let's see. Yeah. And they just made a trade yesterday. Bear with me, Houston. Re-signed Steven Adams to a 3-year extension. Aaron Holiday, Jeff Green, Jabari Smith to a 5-year extension. Jayshawn Tate to a 2-year deal. And Fred VanVleet agreed to a 2-year extension. They added Clint Capella, 3-year deal, bring him back to be their center. Weird with Steven Adams, so one of them is going to come off the bench, but it gives you a good 1A, 1B at the center position. They traded for Kevin Durant, and they added Dorian Finney-Smith, who I think is a very good piece. And they lose Dylan Brooks, Jalen Green, Jock Landale, and they just traded Cam Whitmore to the Wizards for a couple second-round picks. I like Cam Whitmore. I think he has a chance to be a really good NBA player. He has shown some promise in his first couple years, but there was no space for him on this team. They also lost Jalen Green, who I just said. But they add Kevin Durant. So they pair him with Thompson, Sengun, Fred VanVleet, and Kevin Durant. A nice foursome right there with Steven Adams and Clint Capella. And Jabari Smith Jr., don't forget about him. They had no space for Jalen Green anymore, so they moved off Jalen Green to the Suns in that trade for Kevin Durant, and they moved off Cam Whitmore because they had no space for Cam Whitmore, even though Cam Whitmore has had a very solid start to his NBA career. What will Kevin Durant do? Because Houston was second in the West and get bounced early in the playoffs because they just weren't ready. There's a chance with Kevin Durant, with Thompson, with Sengun, with etc., with Jabari Smith, that this team could compete with the Denver Nuggets and Oklahoma City Thunder. You like Peter? Well, they did. They did in the regular season. They did it in the postseason. Kevin Durant gives them that veteran piece. If he can stay healthy, this is a legit championship contender team. And I like how what they did at the big man position. I know it's a little redundant, but you have depth at the center position. And then you move off Jalen Green and Cam Whitmore, who really didn't fit anymore. Not because of how their play, their play didn't fit, but not because they didn't play bad. It's just their fit doesn't really work with Houston right now. Kevin Durant was a splash move. They had to make it. And I don't mind that what they gave up in that trade. Indiana has really done nothing but besides lose some guys. So Indiana makes it to the NBA Finals. They go to a Game 7, and then all of a sudden, we know what happens. Tyrese Halliburton tears his Achilles. He's going to be out for most of the next season. So, like I said earlier, the Eastern Conference is wide open with Jason Tatum out and with Tyrese Halliburton out. They added nobody. They re-signed no one. They added Jay Huff via trade with the Grizzlies, who's a nice center position guy that can score potentially. And then they lose Myles Turner. That's their biggest loss. Like, if you're Indiana right now, you're pissed. Like, that was a huge loss, and he was a huge key to them getting to the NBA Finals. And he just goes to Milwaukee. I think Indiana is in line to take a major step back because of the loss with Myles Turner, and then obviously Tyrese Halliburton missing next season. LA Clippers. Guys, I know we're going here. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please, it means a lot to me. And as always, follow us on social media. Everything is in the description. LA Clippers. They re-signed Nick Batum, who's somehow still in this NBA, and they re-signed James Harden. They added Brook Lopez, who gives them a nice piece at the center position, and they lost Drew Eubanks. The biggest thing is, can this team take the next step with veteran guys and James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, right? Like, this team is very veteran-led, very veteran loaded, and they just haven't been able to get over the hump in the postseason. Like, nothing really moved me with this Clippers offseason. I guess bringing back James Harden, I think Brook Lopez adds a nice little 3-and-D player. LA Lakers. We know they have Luka Doncic, and we know they have LeBron James back when he opted into his player option. They re-signed Jackson Hayes, depth at the center position, which they don't have until now. They added DeAndre Ayton, and they added Jake Rivera, and then they obviously lost Dorian Finney-Smith to Houston, which actually is a pretty big loss. DeAndre Ayton was their big splash because we talked about how LA doesn't have any. After trading Anthony Davis, their depth at the center position was basically non-existent, and that one of the reasons they lost in the first round in Minnesota. You pair DeAndre Ayton, former first-round pick, with Luka Doncic, Austin Reeves, and LeBron James. Lakers top 5 seed in the Western Conference, probably top 3 seed. This team is really good, and I think bringing back Hayes, depth at the center position, and bringing in DeAndre Ayton gives you a little bit of a wiggle room where you can have depth at the center position that they did not have in the postseason after trading Anthony Davis for Luka Doncic. And also, Luka Doncic needs to be in shape and ready to go. Like, enough is enough if you're Luka Doncic. He's too good to be not in shape. Memphis Grizzlies had a busy offseason here. Re-signed Santi Aldama, 3-year deal. Extended, or expected to agree on, they extended it. Jaren Jackson Jr., 5-year deal. Cam Spencer brought back on a 2-year deal. They added Cole Anthony via trade. They added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope via trade. They added Ty Jerome from Cleveland and Jock Landale. And they traded Desmond Bane for KCP, Cole Anthony, and a bunch of first-round picks. They lost Luke Kennard, and they lost Jay Huff. So I think Memphis is going to take a step back here. I do. I like Cole Anthony. I like KCP. I like Jaren Jackson. I like John Morant. Jaren Jackson and John Morant can only get you so far. And I think what they did by Desmond Bane is they're still going to be competitive. They're still going to be a playoff team in the Western Conference with John Morant and Jaren Jackson. Cole Anthony and KCP will help that, mainly Cole Anthony. But you move off Desmond Bane, you get off that contract, and you add a handful of 4 to 5 first-round picks. You can win now and build for the future. I thought that was a great move by Memphis because they can win now in the sense, make the playoffs, compete for maybe win a series or two, not an NBA title contender with John Morant and Jaren Jackson, but they also are building for the future. So if they want to get out of Morant and then potentially Jackson down the road, they have the picks. They kind of pivot towards that rebuild. I like that move for Memphis. So interesting offseason, but I like the direction that they are heading into this season. Miami Heat. Nothing crazy here. They re-signed no one. They added Simone Fatencio, never heard of him. And they added Davion Mitchell, who returns on a 2-year deal. Nice off the bench guard that doesn't really offer much scoring, but can be a really good on-ball defender. And they lose Duncan Robinson, which made sense because they weren't going to pay Duncan Robinson. Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Andrew Wiggins. What do those three get you in an open Eastern Conference? We will see, but that's what they're kind of building around. We'll see if an open Eastern Conference leads them to a non-play-in berth this year in the top 6 seed for Miami. Milwaukee Bucks had another busy offseason. They re-signed Kevin Porter Jr., Bobby Portis on a 3-year extension. Taurean Prince re-signed. Jericho Sims re-signed. And Gary Trent Jr. re-signed. I like Kevin Porter Jr., good scoring guard. Bobby Portis Jr. was on their title contending teams, a really good veteran 4. Gary Trent Jr. can score as well. I like those moves. They added Mitchell from the Hornets. They added Myles Turner, and they added Gary Harris. Gary Harris still offers a little bit of scoring off the bench, kind of like Gary Trent Jr. and Kevin Porter Jr. They added Myles Turner. This was something that I did not see coming. I didn't think Myles Turner was going to leave Indiana. And 2, I didn't think he would go to Milwaukee. So they add Myles Turner. So you have Myles Turner and Giannis with a combination of Bobby Portis, Kevin Porter Jr., Gary Harris, Gary Trent Jr., all that fun stuff. They move off Pat Connaughton, Brook Lopez, and they waive Damian Lillard, extending his contract over the next 4 years, owing him a certain amount of money over the next 4 years. So they move off Damian Lillard, who I've mentioned this twice, another Achilles injury, will be missing most of next season, rehabbing from that Achilles injury. So Milwaukee's like, we got to win now with Giannis. The best win now move that they could have realistically made was adding Myles Turner. Open Eastern Conference, if they get good guard play from the guys they add and the guys on their roster, there's a chance with Giannis and Myles Turner and Bobby Portis, Milwaukee could contend in this Eastern Conference. And I like the Myles Turner deal. I thought that was a really good move. He'll pair really nicely next to Giannis. And they had to move off Dame. I don't like what they did with the contract, and that's going to bite them in the ass down the road, but they had to move off Dame in order to get Myles Turner. And they need to win now with Giannis, depending on if Giannis leaves in a year or two. Minnesota Timberwolves, team that lost in the Western Conference Finals to the eventual NBA champions in Oklahoma City Thunder. They re-signed Joe Ingles, Julius Randle on a 3-year deal after making that trade, and Naz Reid. So bringing back Julius Randle and Naz Reid, 2 key contributors to that Western Conference Final appearance, both great moves in my opinion. They haven't added anybody, but they lost a big one. They lost Luka Garza and they lost Josh Minot, both to Boston, and they lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They were not going to be able to pay Randall, Naz Reid, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker while also paying Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert. They were just not going to be able to. They lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think that's okay. I like him, but I think it's okay with Edwards and DiVincenzo. I thought that was okay, but I think they needed to bring back Randall. They did. And Naz Reid, both key contributors, either starting or off the bench for this Timberwolves team. Timberwolves are once again going to be a force in the Western Conference. Nothing they did to put them over the top of Oklahoma City, but I think they had a solid offseason for what they could do. Pelicans, they re-signed no one. They added Saddiq Bey via trade, Kevin Looney, and Jordan Poole. Saddiq Bey gives you a nice little 3-and-D guy off the bench. Kevin Looney is a nice veteran big. Jordan Poole offers you scoring. He gives you scoring. Doesn't give you much on the defensive side of the ball, but he gives you scoring. I want to see how Jordan Poole kind of fits into this Pelicans team. They did draft Jeremiah Fears. They traded a future first-round pick for Derek Queen. So they added Derek Queen, Jeremiah Fears. We could talk about the Derek Queen trade if that was a good idea. Trading an unprotected 2026 first for Derek Queen. Probably not, even though I love Derek Queen. I love the pick. I love the player and I love the pick. I don't like what they did to get to the player and the pick. Jeremiah Fears is a solid pick. A little redundant with the Jordan Poole ad, but we'll see how that works. They lose Bruce Brown. They trade away C.J. McCollum, and they trade away Kelly Olynyk. The biggest thing is here, how is Zion Williamson going to stay healthy with Jordan Poole, Jeremiah Fears, and Derek Queen? We'll see what New Orleans does. They have a nice little young core going there, but the biggest thing is Zion Williamson stay healthy. New York Knicks. Well, they fired Tom Thibodeau after losing the Eastern Conference Finals, and they hired Mike Brown. No disrespect to Mike Brown, but they downgraded that coach. Mike Brown's a solid NBA coach, but they downgraded at NBA at their head coach level. It is what it is, but they did downgrade. They re-signed no one. They lost no one. They add Jordan Clarkson, and they add, I can't say this guy's name, Gershon Yubasol. The Knicks' problem last year was, obviously, I think Tom Thibodeau had his issues, didn't play the bench, rotation was stagnant, all that kind of stuff. But the Knicks' issue is that Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns are both F defenders, and they really can't play together if in a playoff series or be on the court at the same time in a playoff series because they can't defend. That's an issue for the Knicks, but that's a different conversation. Their additions didn't really do anything here in terms of defense, but they got better off the bench, and that was their struggle. They had no depth last year. Jordan Clarkson gives you nothing on the defensive side of the ball, but gives you a good scoring combo guard off the bench. Gershon Yobosel can play next to Mitchell Robinson. He can play next to Cat. He's the stretch four that the Knicks need off the bench. So their additions are good. I like their additions. The biggest thing is, can they figure out how to play Brunson and Cat together in a playoff series where they can both, where they're not liabilities on the defensive side of the ball, but their additions don't change that, but their additions are good additions to the bench, if that makes any sense. Oklahoma City Thunder. Not much they needed to do. This team just won an NBA championship. They re-signed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to a 4-year extension. They brought AJ Mitchell back on a 3-year deal, and they signed Jalen Williams, the big Jalen Williams, not the guard Jalen Williams, on a 3-year extension. They added no one. They lost Dylan Jones. Enough said. They have J-Dub, they have Shea, they have Chet, they have the team that just won an NBA championship, and they lost no one from that team. So another year where the Thunder are going to be the favorite to win the NBA championship. Orlando Magic re-signed Mo Wagner. This team made the playoffs last year, and I think this team, people are really picking this team to contend for in the Eastern Conference with what was happened to the Eastern Conference. So Mo Wagner, they agreed on a 1-year deal. They added Desmond Bane, and they added Tyus Jones. So I just praised Memphis for adding 5 first-round picks, KCP and Cole Anthony for Desmond Bane. More the picks than the players, but solid players there. This is an all-in trade from Orlando. You trade 5 future first-round picks for Desmond Bane. I like Desmond Bane. He's a really good NBA player. He's a borderline all-star level player. Orlando sees something in him. If this works, they can be a title contender team. They lose Cole Anthony, they lose KCP, and they lose Gary Harris. It's the biggest thing is the picks. It's not the players. I like the players. It's not the players. Desmond Bane with Paulo Banchero. This team has a chance to be a very good team next year in a weak Eastern Conference. They saw a window to strike with the Eastern Conference, and they did that with adding Desmond Bane. A lot of picks, but they did that with Desmond Bane. 76ers. It's basically, does Joel Embiid stay healthy? What do we get from Paul George? And is Tyrese Maxey, and not what we get. We know Tyrese Maxey is an all NBA level player. Does Paul George return to anything? And does Joel Embiid stay healthy? That's the biggest thing. They lose Gershon Yobosel. They add Trendon Watford. They re-sign Justin Edwards and Eric Gordon. It's basically, what do we get from Paul George? And does Joel Embiid stay healthy? And they get that, the Sixers can contend in the Eastern Conference. Oops. Suns. Well, the Suns are rebuilding. But then they traded a first-round pick for Mark Williams. So, yeah. I don't know what the Suns are doing. They re-signed Colin Gillespie. Sure. They added Dylan Brooks via the trade, and they added Jalen Green. I like the Jalen Green. I think Jalen Green has a chance to be an all-star level player. He has the scoring. He just needs to be a little bit more consistent and be a better defender, but I think he'll get looks on this team next to Devin Booker. They added Nigel Hayes-Davis, and they brought in Mark Williams. But they also drafted Kyle Monach from Duke. So they add 2 centers, and they traded a future first-round pick for Mark Williams. I don't love trading a future first-round pick for Mark Williams. I don't. Well, when they just drafted Maliak from Duke in the lottery, where you're like, we're kind of rebuilding here, but we're not. So Mark Williams is going to be paired with Devin Booker and Jalen Green, and I guess Bradley Beal, because they just can't move off that contract with Bradley Beal, even though they want to. They lose Kevin Durant, Tyus Jones, Cody Martin, Milicic, and Mason Plumlee. I want Maliak to play. I like Mark Williams. I don't know if you trade a first-round pick for Mark Williams. I think that was a really poor decision by Phoenix, because you could have played a nice young in Maliak. Jalen Green develops. You have Devin Booker still, and then you try to move off Bradley Beal at some point, if you can ever move off that contract, or you just let it eat or buy him out eventually. Mark Williams helps you be more competitive now, and I guess that pleases Devin Booker in the guy that is your franchise player. I just don't know if that's the right direction Phoenix should go, but they did. Don't love it, but I like Jalen Green. They had to move off Kevin Durant. Almost done here. Like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. The Portland Trailblazers re-signed Garrett Temple. Sure. They added Drew Holiday, and they traded Anthony Simons, and they lost DeAndre Ayton, which is fine. He didn't fit. I would have kept Simons. I don't know if Drew Holiday really helps you, but if Portland's trying to get into a playoff contention level team, Drew Holiday helps you. They have Scoot Henderson. Portland's fine. Like, they're nothing special right now. I don't know if that was the right move, but if they're trying to win now, I think Drew Holiday kind of gives you that piece. They probably didn't want to pay Simons down the road, but don't love the trade, to be completely honest with you. Almost done. Sacramento Kings, they didn't re-sign anybody. They added Dennis Schroeder, and they traded for Dario Saric. They lost Jake Lareva, and they traded Jonas Valanciunas. I don't get that. Dennis Schroeder, sure, 3-year deal, guard off the bench. Sacramento's a mess with DeRozan and Levine. Just rerunning the Bulls thing that really didn't work. They had Fox at one point. They still have Sabonis, who's a really good NBA player, but they had Fox. They also had Tyrese Halliburton. Like, they should have just kept those two and built around those two. But I like Sabonis. It's not Sabonis' issue, but they should have kept those guys. That's a couple years. We could have done that 3 years ago. Trading Jonas Valanciunas for Dario Saric was pretty freaking bad. Not gonna lie. That was a really bad deal for Sacramento. Dario Saric is really nothing at this point in his career in the NBA. Jonas Valanciunas is a good, solid center. I don't like that trade. I think Kings had a very poor offseason, and they have no direction at the moment. Besides Devin Carter, because he went to Providence. San Antonio Spurs. We have a couple left. San Antonio Spurs right here, guys. Re-signed no one. Added Luke Cornett. So they add their 5 next to Victor Wembanyama. They also have De'Aaron Fox. They drafted Dylan Harper, and they lost Sandro Mamolakovic. I did not say his name right. Whatever. They added Luke Cornett. They're a young team. They're fun. They're going to be really fun this year with Fox, Harper, and Wembanyama. I think Luke Cornett gives you a nice, solid center, solid offseason from San Antonio. Mainly drafted Dylan Harper was their biggest move. Toronto Raptors re-signed Jakob Poeltl, who's a really good NBA player all of a sudden, and they added Sandro, who left San Antonio. RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, Brandon Ingram. You bring back Poeltl. This team has a chance to make a playoffs in Toronto. I really do. I really like Toronto. I think that they're a fun, exciting team. They tried getting Kevin Durant. That was not really an option. Kind of like what they did with Kawhi a handful of years ago that led to an NBA championship. I bringing back Poeltl was smart. Toronto's cool. They're going to be a fun, playing-ish team, in my opinion. Utah Jazz. I expect another. They drafted Ace Bailey, which shocked everyone. But they re-signed no one. They added Jusuf Nurkic, and they lose Johnny Juzang. They traded away Colin Sexton, and they bought out Jordan Clarkson, who ended up going to the Knicks. Jusuf Nurkic is going to be fine. Got to give Ace Bailey kind of room to grow. Holy Markkinen's still there. Another bad year incoming for Utah, in my opinion. Washington Wizards had a busy offseason, and this is the last one, so make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, social media on X and on Instagram. We have an Open Championship preview coming in about a week and a half, 4th and final major. So you guys, if you guys love our golf content, do not go anywhere. Washington Wizards, they re-signed no one. They added CJ McCollum via trade with the Pelicans. They added Dylan Jones via trade with the Thunder. Added Kelly Olynyk, trade with the Pelicans. And they added Cam Whitmore with the Rockets. I don't mind the McCollum trade. That's a solid trade. I love the Cam Whitmore trade because I think giving up a couple second-round picks for Cam Whitmore is a really good move. It gives you a chance to score with the Wizards. I think he has a good chance to be a really good NBA player. He adds a lot of scoring. Needs to be more consistent on the defensive side of the ball. They lose Jordan Poole, which is fine. He just doesn't do anything for me. Sadiq Bey and Anthony Gill. But I like adding CJ McCollum and Cam Whitmore. Maybe Wizards can compete for a play-in spot this year. They also drafted – who'd they draft? Why can't I think of it? Who did the Washington Wizards draft? It's not Fierce, Trey Johnson. They added Trey Johnson as well. So you have Cam Whitmore, Bub Carrington. This is a good, solid Wizards team that could be fun, maybe sneak into a play-in spot. But all season-wise, CJ McCollum and Cam Whitmore, I thought they had a pretty good offseason. That is going to do it. Let me know what you guys think. Wow, that is way too close. Let me know what you guys think of your team and what they did. Let me know down below in the comment section how your team did in this NBA offseason. Social media, Talking Sports PD, X, and on Instagram. The links are in the description. And as always, Underdog Fantasy, use code TSP for 100% deposit match up to $100 on Underdog Fantasy. Link is in the description as well as our Apple Podcast and our Spotify links. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Follow us on social media. Follow me on social media at DiBiasi Peter. The next episode will be out in a week and a half on all platforms. That will be our final major preview, the Open preview in Northern Ireland. That's going to be our fourth final major preview. So don't miss that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the NBA content lately. We did an NBA Finals preview. We did an NBA Draft preview. And then we did an NBA free agency recaps. Hopefully you guys enjoyed all this content. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the NBA season, the finals, the draft, and all of the free agency. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. That's enough talking for me. I'm going to stop talking right now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.